The rusted gate creaked open and a barefoot girl in a faded yellow dress stepped onto marble so white it hurt her eyes. She clutched a crumpled photograph in one fist and stared up at the tallest man she had ever seen. "Why is my mom's picture hanging in your mansion?" she asked, voice cracking like dry earth. The billionaire's champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered across the floor, exactly where the girl's tears began to fall. If this moment already has your heart racing, hit that like button now and subscribe with notifications on, because the next 12 minutes will unravel a secret that changes 2 lives forever. The girl's name was Lila, 12 years old and small enough that the security guards almost missed her slipping past the fountain shaped like leaping dolphins. She had walked 4 hours from the riverside slums, dodging motorbikes and stray dogs, the photograph pressed against her chest so tightly the edges curled. It showed a woman with Lila's same wide brown eyes and crooked smile, standing in front of a Christmas tree strung with paper chains. On the back, in blue ink, someone had written, "Elena, 2009. Lila had found the picture wedged inside her mother's old work apron the night the fever took her. That was 6 months ago. Since then, the landlord had padlocked their shack, the neighbors had stopped leaving rice at the door, and Lila had learned that hunger sounds like a drum in your stomach at 3 a.m. Across the city, in the glass and gold tower known as Aurora Heights, Victor Harlan was turning 50. The party was supposed to celebrate the launch of his clean water initiative, ironic, considering the crystal decanters on every table. Victor wore grief the way other men wore cufflinks, polished, hidden, and expensive. 23 years earlier, his college sweetheart Elena had vanished the week before finals. No note, no forwarding address, just an empty dorm room and a postcard from a bus station that never arrived. Victor had searched for a month, then buried the ache beneath boardrooms and billions. Tonight, the ache was supposed to stay buried. Lila's voice carried over the string quartet because it was the only sound in the room that wasn't paid for. Guests in silk gowns turned like a flock of startled birds. Victor's personal assistant, a woman whose heels could slice bread, started toward the child, but Victor raised one hand. The gesture was small, the room obeyed. He descended the staircase slowly, patent shoes clicking, until he stood 2 feet from the girl who smelled of river mud and determination. "Show me," he said. Lila unfolded the photograph with trembling fingers. Victor took it as though it might disintegrate. The Christmas tree in the background was the same one his fraternity had stolen from the campus quad in 2008. Elena's hair was shorter, her smile tired, but it was her. Undeniably. Victor's knees threatened to fold. He looked from the picture to the girl and saw the same tilt of the head, the same constellation of freckles across the nose. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm Lila. Elena was my mom. She died." The words came out flat, rehearsed from telling them to social workers who never wrote anything down. She kept saying one day we'd find the man in the lights. I thought she was dreaming. Then I saw your house on the news, and her picture was on the wall behind you. Victor remembered the interview. A lifestyle channel had filmed him in the East Gallery, where he kept photographs of every humanitarian award, and one framed image he could never explain to journalists. Elena laughing on a picnic blanket, the only personal photo in a house of marble and trophies. He had told the reporter it was someone important from college. The truth was uglier, it was the only way he could fall asleep some nights, staring at her frozen in time. The party dissolved into murmurs. Someone's phone flashed. Victor didn't care. He crouched, silk trousers straining, until he was eye level with Lila. "Would you like to come inside?" he asked. "Just you and me. We'll talk where it's quiet." Lila hesitated. Every adult stranger was a potential threat, the streets had taught her that. But this man's eyes were red-rimmed, and his hand shook when he reached out, not to grab, but to offer. She placed her smaller hand in his. The ballroom doors closed behind them with a soft thud that sounded, to Lila, like the closing of a fairy tale book. Victor led her past suits of armor and a grandfather clock that cost more than her entire neighborhood. They entered a library smelling of leather and lemon polish. He pulled a cord, the chandelier dimmed to candle glow. Lila climbed onto a chair too tall for her feet to touch the floor and swung them like pendulums. Victor sat opposite, still holding the photograph. "Tell me everything you know about your mother." So Lila told him. How Elena had sewn uniforms by lamplight, how she sang old love songs while stirring fish sauce into rice, how she coughed blood into rags for a month before the clinic turned her away for lack of payment. Lila left out the parts about sleeping under bridges, but Victor heard them in the pauses. When she finished, silence pooled between them. Finally Victor spoke, voice rough. "Elena and I were supposed to graduate together. She wanted to build schools in villages without electricity. I wanted to invent water filters cheap enough for those same villages. We had plans on napkins." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Then one morning she was gone. I thought she left me." "She didn't," Lila said quickly. "She told me the story 100 times. You fought because you wanted her to wait until your company made money, and she said children were dying now. She took a bus south to volunteer. That's where I was born, in a clinic with a tin roof. She never stopped loving you. She just loved the children more." Victor pressed his palms to his eyes. Billionaires weren't supposed to cry in front of children, but the rules felt suddenly childish. When he looked up, his face was wet. "I could have found her. I had resources even then." Lila shrugged, a gesture too old for her shoulders. "Mom said rich people live on a different map." The word struck Victor like a slap. He thought of the private jets, the security details, the way he signed checks without reading the memos. Different map. He stood abruptly. "Come with me." He led her up a private elevator to the rooftop garden where jasmine grew in defiance of the city smog. Below them, lights glittered like spilled coins. Victor pointed to a dark patch along the river. "That's where you walked from?" Lila nodded. "I'm going to build a bridge," he said. "Not a metaphor. A real one. With lights so no child walks 4 hours in the dark again." Lila studied him, suspicious. "People say things. I'm not people. I'm he stopped. The word father lodged in his throat, too large, too soon. DNA was a phone call away, but father was a lifetime. I'm the man who should have been there. Let me start now." He expected argument, pride, the armor poor kids wear like second skin. Instead Lila asked, "Can I have noodles first? The kind with the soft eggs?" Victor laughed until he couldn't breathe. He carried her piggyback down to the kitchen, past baffled chefs, and watched her slurp noodles louder than the exhaust fans. Between bites she told him about the stray dog named General who guarded their shack, about the teacher who let her read textbooks after class, about the way her mother's voice cracked on the high notes of a moon river. Later, when the moon hung like a clipped fingernail, Victor tucked Lila into a guest bed bigger than her old home. She clutched the photograph to her chest. "Will you keep it?" she asked. "It's yours," he said. "But I'd like a copy. And I'd like you to stay." Lila considered. "General needs me. General can have the East Wing." She giggled, the sound bright as breaking dawn. "He chews furniture. I'll buy furniture he can chew." The next morning, Victor cancelled 3 board meetings. He drove Lila himself, in the least ostentatious car he owned, a 10-year-old sedan that still turned heads because of the man behind the wheel. They collected General, who left muddy prints across cream leather and promptly fell asleep on Victor's lap. They stopped at the padlocked shack. Victor paid the landlord 6 months' rent in cash, then paid the neighbors to watch the place until Lila decided what to keep. She took only her mother's apron and a cracked teacup painted with forget-me-nots. Back at Aurora Heights, Victor cleared the East Gallery. Painters arrived to cover gold damask with sunny yellow. A carpenter built a loft bed shaped like a boat. Lila chose curtains printed with constellations. General claimed an antique Persian rug and refused to apologize. But healing is not a montage. Nights were the worst. Lila woke screaming from dreams of clinic doors closing. Victor sat outside her room the first week, unsure whether to enter. On the 8th night she padded into his study barefoot, dragging a blanket. Without a word she climbed into his lap and fell asleep against his heartbeat. Victor held her until sunrise, learning the weight of a child's trust. He hired tutors, but Lila insisted on returning to her public school 3 days a week. "My friends think I got kidnapped by a vampire," she reported. Victor attended the parent-teacher conference in a suit that cost more than the school roof. The teacher assumed he was a donor until Lila introduced him as "my Victor." He left a check anyway, earmarked for art supplies. DNA results arrived on a Tuesday. Victor stared at the 99.9% match until the paper trembled. He found Lila on the rooftop feeding General leftover steak. "I have news," he said. "I know," she replied, not looking up. "Mom said you'd have the same cowlick on the left side." "You do." Victor touched his hair, surprised. "You're my daughter." Lila finally met his eyes. "Does that mean I can call you Dad?" The word unlocked something in Victor's chest. He nodded, unable to speak. Lila threw her arms around his neck, and General barked at the sudden movement, tail thumping like a drum. They buried Elena properly that spring. Victor bought a plot beneath a mango tree in the cemetery overlooking the river. Lila wore the yellow dress, now clean and mended. She placed the forget-me-not teacup at the headstone. Victor read a poem Elena had loved in college, voice breaking on every stanza. Afterward, they released paper boats into the water, each carrying a wish. Lila said, "Let Mom see the bridge." Construction began in June. Victor's company partnered with the city, but he insisted on one condition: every worker must be someone who had once walked Lila's route. Former scavengers, street vendors, grandmothers who sold flowers at traffic lights, they poured concrete and welded steel under floodlights. Lila handed out hard hats stickered with General's paw print. The bridge's name was decided by vote, Elena's Span. Opening day brought monsoon clouds and a crowd larger than any product launch. Victor wore a simple white shirt, Lila wore her mother's apron over jeans. She cut the ribbon with scissors borrowed from her old sewing kit. Cameras flashed. A reporter asked Victor what inspired the project. He looked at Lila, who was teaching General to walk the yellow center line. "My daughter," he said. "She reminded me that clean water starts with safe passage." That night, fireworks reflected in the river like fallen stars. Victor and Lila sat on the bridge's pedestrian walkway, legs dangling above the current. General snored between them. "Do you think Mom can see?" Lila asked. Victor considered the sky, vast and indifferent and beautiful. "I think she never left." Lila leaned her head against his arm. "I used to pray for a dad. I didn't know I had to lose a mom to find one." Victor's throat tightened. "I used to pray for forgiveness. I didn't know it would come wearing your face." They sat until the fireworks ended and the city lights took over. Somewhere below, a paper boat still floated, carrying forget-me-nots toward the sea.